Hello, today I'm looking at the Majjhima number 77, which is called the MahaSakaludayi Sutta, or the Greater Discourse to Sakaludayin. Now the location is Rajagaha and the Bamboo Grove, and the Squirrel Sanctuary and Peacock's Sanctuary. And the people mentioned are Buddha, and three well-known wanderers called Anabara, Varadara and Sakaludayin. Now this is quite a long sutta, and the first part of the sutta is looking at other sects that existed at the time of Buddha, and the second part of the sutta is a discourse on why folk are content with the Buddha's Dhamma. So settle back, and here we go. So before the morning alms round in Rajagaha, Buddha went from the Bamboo Grove to the Peacock Sanctuary, where well-known wanderers were staying, such as Anabara, Varadara and Sakaludayin. When Buddha arrived in the Wanderers' Park, there was much loud and noisy chatter amongst the wanderers, and this is previously been described in Sutta 76, the previous sutta, and where they're discussing about kings and lands and stuff like that. But Sakaludayin notices Buddha approach, and knowing that Buddha likes it to be calm and quiet, he suggests to the other wanderers that they become quiet, and then Buddha might join them. And Buddha does join them, and after being seated and properly greeted, Buddha asks, "Udayin, what discussion have I interrupted?" Now, Udayin doesn't answer directly, but asks in return, "When recluses and Brahmins of various sects meet in the debating hall, this topic has arisen. It is of benefit for the people of Anga and Magadha," that's the local area, "that all these famous people are spending the rains retreat at Rajagaha. There's Purana Kassapa, Magala Gosala, Ajita Kesakambalin, Pakuda Kachayana, Sanja Belatiputta, Niganta Nataputta, the founders of sects regarded by many as saints, and also, of course, the recluse Gautama. Tell me, among these worthy recluses and Brahmins, heads of orders regarded by many as saints, who is honoured, respected, revered and venerated by his followers? And how, honouring and respecting him, do they live in dependence upon him?" So for each person named in turn, Buddha states that they are not honoured, respected, revered or venerated by their followers. In fact, their followers do not live in dependence on that person. Indeed, the person is scorned by the scorn shown for his teachings, or Dhamma. The example given in each case is as follows. Once the leader of a sect, for example Purana Kassapa, was teaching his Dhamma to several hundred followers, and one of his followers suggested Purana Kassapa did not know the answer to a question, a statement that Purana Kassapa refuted, but even so many followers left him. So Buddha then repeats this in turn for the other sect leaders, Makala Gosala, Ajita Kesam Kabalan, and so on. So I just sort of looked up on Wikipedia who these people are and what their belief systems were, just out of interest. So there's Purana Kassapa, who was mentioned. Now his view is about amoralism. He denies there is any reward or punishment for either good or bad deeds. And then Makala Gosala, so he's part of or head of the Ajivika sect, And the belief there is fatalism. We are powerless, suffering is predestined. And there's Ajita Kesam Kambali of the Lokayata sect, and their belief is materialism. So live happily because with death all is annihilated. And the next one is Pakuda Kachayana, and his belief is eternalism. Matter, pleasure, pain and the soul are eternal and do not interact. And then Niganta Nataputta of the Jain sect, which still exists. The belief there is restraint, be endowed with, cleansed with, and suffused with the avoidance of all evil. And the last one is the Sanjaya Balatiputta, or Ajnana sect. And their belief is in agnosticism. So I don't think so, I don't think in that in any way, or otherwise, I don't think not, or not. So suspension of judgment. So having gone through that, Buddha continues, with my teaching, that's Buddha's teaching, when there is an interruption, this is silenced by my other followers who wish to listen. Arguments and discussions do not break out. And those that do leave the training and return to the low life, they blame themselves, not others, that they were unable to live the holy life. And even when they become monastery attendants or lay followers, they still observe the 5 precepts. Thus the recluse Gautama is honoured, respected, revered and venerated by his followers, and his followers live in dependence on him, honouring and respecting him. But, Udayin, Buddha continues, how many qualities do you see in me which cause my followers to honour, respect, revere and venerate me and live in dependence on me? Honourable Sir, Udayin replies, I see 5 qualities in the Blessed One, because of which his followers honour, respect, revere and venerate him, live in dependence upon him. And those 5 are: the Blessed One eats little and commends eating little. The Blessed One is content with any kind of robe and commends contentment with any kind of robe. The Blessed One is content with any kinds of alms food and commends contentment with any kinds of alms food. The Blessed One is content with any kind of resting place and commends contentment with any kind of resting place. The Blessed One is secluded and commends seclusion. So these are all, if you like, observable traits of the Buddha. Buddha then responds by saying that it is not because of these 5 qualities that his followers honour, respect, revere and venerate him. Buddha states that each case is not necessarily true. Sometimes he has a lot to eat, so why should people with little to eat follow him? Sometimes he is given fine robes, so why should people who made their robes from cloth from charnel grounds follow him? Sometimes he has fine food to eat, so why should someone eating only rice follow him? Sometimes he rests in palaces, so why should someone who sleeps on a tree root follow him? Sometimes he is in the company of many people, so why should a recluse who only returns to the Sangha once a fortnight to recite the Patimokkha, why should such a person follow him? Now the Patimokkha, as you may know, is the prescriptive list of instructions for Buddhist followers to adhere to. And there's 227 rules for monks and 311 rules for nuns. That's the Dhamma Vinaya. So Buddha finishes up by saying, no, Udayin, the 5 qualities because of which my followers know, respect, revere and venerate me, live in dependence upon me, are as follows. 1, that the Gautama is virtuous. 2, that the Gautama has excellent knowledge and vision. He teaches the Dhamma through direct knowledge with a sound basis in a convincing manner. 3. That Gautama is wise. He possesses the supreme aggregate of wisdom. He sees the implication of his assertions. He confutes with reason the doctrine of others. 4. I explain what and why is suffering, the origin, the cessation, and the way leading to cessation. That is the Four Noble Truths. 5. I tell my followers how to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. To abide, contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully alert, aware and mindful, having put away greed and grief for the world. To abide, contemplating feelings as feelings, ardent, fully alert, aware and mindful, and so on. To abide, contemplating mind as mind, ardent, fully aware. To abide, contemplating mind objects as mind objects, fully aware and mindful. And through this, many of my followers have reached the perfection of direct knowledge. Now also, O Dayin, I have told my followers the way to develop 4 right kinds of striving. Here a follower awakens zeal for the non-arising of unarisen, unwholesome states. He makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. A follower, he awakens zeal for the abandoning of arisen, unwholesome states. He makes effort, arouses energy, so on. He awakens zeal for the arising of unarisen, wholesome states. He makes effort, arouses energy, and so on. He awakens zeal for the continuance, non-disappearance, strengthening, increase and fulfillment by development of arisen, wholesome states. So it's going from the non-arising of the unarisen, unwholesome states through to maintaining the arisen, wholesome states. Through this, many followers of mine abide, having reached direct knowledge. Again, O Dayin, I have told my followers the way to develop the 4 bases for spiritual power, consisting in concentration due to zeal and determined striving, concentration due to energy and determined striving, concentration due to purity of mind and determined striving, concentration due to investigation and determined striving. And through this, many followers of mine abide, having reached direct knowledge. Again, O Dayin, I have told my followers the way to develop the 5 spiritual faculties. The faculty of faith, which leads to peace and enlightenment. The faculty of energy, which leads to peace and enlightenment. The faculty of mindfulness. The faculty of concentration. The faculty of wisdom, which leads to peace and enlightenment. And through this, many of my followers abide, having reached direct knowledge. Now again, O Dayin, I have told my followers the way to develop the 5 powers which lead to peace and enlightenment. The power of faith, the power of energy, the power of mindfulness, the power of concentration, and the power of wisdom. So it's the faculty and then the power. And through this, many of my followers have reached direct knowledge. Again, O Dayin, I have told my followers the way to develop the 7 enlightenment factors. There is the mindfulness enlightenment factor, which is developed by seclusion, dispassion and cessation, and results in relinquishment. And he develops the investigation of states enlightenment factor, the energy enlightenment factor, the rapture enlightenment factor, the tranquility enlightenment factor, the concentration enlightenment factor, and the equanimity enlightenment factor, all of which are supported by seclusion, dispassion and cessation and result in relinquishment. And through this, many of my followers abide, having reached direct knowledge. Now again, O Dayin, I have told my followers the way to develop the Noble Eightfold Path. Here a follower develops right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And through this, many followers of mine abide, having reached direct knowledge. Again, Udayin, I have told my followers the way to develop the 8 liberations. So that's in Pali, Atta Vimukha. And it's also interpreted by Bhikkhu Samahita in his version as the 8 deliverances, rather than the 8 liberations. So following on from the Bodhi translation, the first liberation, being of material form, one sees forms, hands, feet and so on. The second liberation, inwardly formless, one sees forms externally. The third liberation, one is resolved to only see the beautiful. And the fourth liberation, with the surmounting of perceptions of form, with the disappearance of perceptions of sensory impact, without paying attention to perception of change, aware that space is infinite, one enters upon and abides in the base of infinite space. So this reminds me of stepping through the jhanas. The fifth liberation or deliverance, by completely surmounting the base of infinite space, aware that consciousness is infinite, one enters upon and abides in the base of infinite consciousness. And the sixth liberation, by completely surmounting or going beyond the base of infinite consciousness, aware that there is nothing, one enters upon and abides in the base of nothingness. And the seventh liberation, by completely surmounting or going beyond the base of nothingness, one enters upon and abides in the base of neither perception nor non-perception. And the eighth liberation, by completely surmounting, going beyond the base of neither perception nor non-perception, one enters upon or abides in the cessation of perception and feeling. And through this, Buddha continues, many followers of mine abide, having reached direct knowledge. So that's basically describing, I think, the sort of gentle transition from awareness of bodily form to the cessation of perception and feeling. Again, Udayin, Buddha continues, I have told my followers the way to develop the 8 bases for transcendence. So the first base for transcendence, perceiving form internally, one sees forms externally, limited, fair and ugly. By transcending them, one perceives thus, I know, I see. So the second base, perceiving form internally, one sees form externally, immeasurable, fair and ugly. By transcending them, one perceives thus, I know, I see. The third base, not perceiving form internally, one sees form externally, limited, fair and ugly. By transcending them, one perceives thus, I know, I see. The fourth base, not perceiving form internally, one sees form externally, immeasurable, fair and ugly. By transcending them, one perceives thus, I know, I see. The fifth base, not perceiving form internally, one sees form externally, blue of blue colour and luminosity. By transcending them, one perceives, I know, I see. The sixth base, this goes on to describe seeing the colour yellow. One perceives this, I know, I see. The seventh base, seeing the colour red. One perceives thus, I know, I see. Eighth base, seeing the colour white. Just like a morning star, so too, not perceiving form internally, one sees form externally, with white luminosity. By transcending them, one perceives this, thus, I know, I see. And so many of my followers abide and have reached direct knowledge. Again, Udayin, I have told many of my followers, the way to develop the 10 kasina bases. So contemplating the earth kasina, undivided and immeasurable. Another contemplates the water kasina, another the fire kasina, another the air kasina. And so with the blue kasina, yellow kasina, red kasina, white kasina, others contemplate the space kasina. Another contemplates the consciousness kasina. And through this, many of my followers have reached direct knowledge. Now, this is the first explanation I've seen in the Pali Canon of kasinas, and this may have been a sort of common practice at the time of a way of achieving the meditative states. So the one that's commonly taught now is mindfulness of breathing from kasinas. But in going into the mindfulness of breathing, at some stage, the breath appears to or stops. So what does one then contemplate? So the suggestion is contemplating kasinas. And the kasina is basically training, a way of training oneself to perceive colours internally. So it goes, you take a colour like, say, a red circle. So in my case, I just took a printout of a Japanese flag, which is a red circle on a white background, and looking at it quite intently, closing your eyes, and then see if you can see that red image. And after a while, you just close your eyes and see the red image. And then after a further while, the image changes colour to a blue, and so on. And then what happens next? You get what's called the counterpart sign, and that's where the image changes from being just, say, a right to extremely bright red or extremely bright yellow, and so on. And what I'm quite intrigued with is, having followed that practice, that if you go through the colours of the rainbow, which is red, was it Richard of York going backwards in vain, the red, orange, yellow, so on, they're all apparent as listed here, the red and the yellow and the blue and so on, but not green. I've never seen green, so that's quite interesting. So anyway, sorry, back to the script and back to the book. Again, Udayin, I have told my followers the way to develop the 4 jhanas. Here, quite secluded from sense pleasures, and I've just noticed here that this is the same as in Majjhima number 39, which describes the jhanas also. So, here, quite secluded from sense pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with raptures and pleasures born of seclusion. He makes the rapture and pleasure born of seclusion drench, steep, fill and pervade his body, so is no part of his whole body unpervaded by the rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. Buddha then likens this experience to a skilled man taking some powder in his hands, adding moisture, kneading it with his hands, so the wetted powder is soaked through, completely wet, but the moisture does not ooze out. And so, Buddha continues, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, a monk enters upon and abides in the second jhana, which has self-confidence and singleness of mind, without applied and sustained thought, with rapture and pleasure born of concentration. He makes the rapture and pleasure born of concentration drench, steep and pervade his body, so is no part unpervaded by the rapture and pleasure born of concentration. And this time Buddha likens the experience to being like a lake whose waters well up from below with cool water, so that the whole lake is drenched, steeped and pervaded by this cool water. Buddha goes on, again with the fading away as well of rapture, a monk abides in equanimity, and mindful and fully aware, still feeling pleasure with the body, he enters upon and abides in the third jhana. He makes the pleasure, divested of rapture, drench, steep, fill and pervade his body. There is no part of his whole body unpervaded by the pleasure, divested of rapture. The analogy used this time by Buddha is of a pond of blue or red or white lotuses, some of which thrive in the water without rising from it, so that cool water drenches, steeps, fills and pervades them to their tips and their roots, so no part is unpervaded. Again, continues Buddha, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, a monk enters upon the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and a purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. He sits pervading this body with a pure, bright mind, so that no part of his whole body is unpervaded by the pure, bright mind. And the analogy this time is of a man covered from head to foot by a white cloth. No part of his body that is not covered. So too a monk sits pervading his body with a pure, bright mind, so that no part of his whole body is unpervaded by the pure, bright mind. And thereby, Buddha concludes, many followers of mine abide, having reached direct knowledge. So at this point he ends the description of the jhanas, so he hasn't gone on to the further four immaterial states. But anyway. Again, Udayin, I have told my followers the way to understand as follows. This body of mine, made of material form, consisting of the four great elements, earth, fire, air and water, procreated by a mother and father, built up out of boiled rice and gruel, is subject to impermanence, to being worn and rubbed away, to dissolution and disintegration. And this consciousness of mine is supported by it and bound up with it. And understanding this, many followers of mine have reached direct knowledge. Again, Udayin, I have told my followers the way to create from this body another body, having form, mind made, with all its limbs lacking no faculty. Just as though a man were to pull a sword from a scabbard and think thus, this is the sword, this is the scabbard. This sword is one, the scabbard another. It is from the scabbard the sword is pulled out. And thereby many followers of mine have reached direct knowledge. Again, Udayin, I have told my followers the way to wield various kinds of supernormal powers. Having been one, they become many. Having been many, they become one. They appear and vanish. They go unhindered through walls, through enclosures, through mountains, as though through space, diving in and out of earth as if this were water. Seated cross-legged, they travel in space like birds. With their hands they touch and stroke the moon and the sun. They would bodily master even as far as the Brahmin world. So, excuse me, I'll reread that. They wield bodily mastery even as far as the Brahmin world. Just as a skilled potter may shape a pot, a goldsmith create and fashion a fine piece of art, so too I have told my followers the way to wield the various kinds of supernormal powers. And thereby my followers of mine have reached direct knowledge. Many followers of mine have reached direct knowledge. Again, Udayin, I have told my followers the way whereby with the divine air element, which is purified and surpasses the human ability, they hear both kinds of sound, the divine and the human. Just as a well-practiced trumpet player might make himself heard without difficulty in the four quarters. And thereby many followers of mine have reached direct knowledge. Again, Udayin, I have told my followers the way to understand the minds of other beings, having encompassed them with their own minds. They understand a mind affected by lust as affected by lust, a mind unaffected by lust as unaffected by lust. So too with hate, delusion, a contracted mind or a distracted mind, an exalted mind, a surpassed mind, a concentrated mind, and a liberated mind. Just as a young man and woman looking, young man or woman, looking in a clear, bright mirror, would know if there was a blemish. Thus, there is a blemish, or know if there was no blemish, there is no blemish. So too, I have told my followers the way to understand a mind affected by lust, unaffected by lust, and so on. A liberated mind, an unliberated mind. And thereby many followers of mine have reached direct knowledge. Again, Udayin, I have told my followers the way to recollect their many past lives. 1 birth, 2 births, 20, 30, 100,000 births, many eons of world contraction, many eons of world expansion. Sounds similar to the Big Bang Theory. 2,500 years ago. Anyway. There I was so named, of such a clan, of such an appearance, such was my nutriment, such my experience of pleasure and pain, such my longevity. And passing away from there, I reappeared elsewhere, and there too I was so named, and passing away from there, I reappeared here. It is like a man going from his own village to another village, where he stood, watched, spoke, kept silent, and from that village went to another village, and so on. And thereby many followers of mine have reached direct knowledge. Again, Udayin, I have told my followers the way whereby with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, they see beings pass away and reappearing, inferior, superior, fair, ugly, the fortunate, the unfortunate. They understand how beings pass on according to their actions thus. These worthy, who were ill-conducted in body, speech and mind, revilers of noble ones, wrong in their views, wrong in their actions, on the dissolution of the body after death, they have reappeared in a state of deprivation, via a bad destination, in perdition, even in hell. But these worthy ones, who were well conducted in body, speech and mind, not revilers of noble ones, right in their views, giving effect to right view, and in their actions, on the dissolution of their bodies, after death, they have reappeared in a good destination, even in a heavenly world. They see all this with the divine eye. It is as though there were 2 houses with doors opposite, and a man standing between the doors then saw people entering and passing to and fro. That is like seeing with the divine eye. And thereby many followers of mine have reached direct knowledge. Again, Udayin, I have told my disciples, or my followers, the way whereby, realizing for themselves with direct knowledge, they here and now enter upon and abide in the deliverance of mind and the deliverance by wisdom, that are taintless by destruction of the taints. Just as a man with good sight can see down through a clear, limpid lake to see shoals of fish and gravels, pebbles and shells. And thereby many followers of mine abide, having reached the consummation and perfection of direct knowledge. Thus, Udayin is this Udayin is the 5th quality for which my followers honour, respect, revere and venerate me, and live in dependence on me, honouring and respecting me. This is what the Blessed One said, and the Wanderer Udayin was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. And so ends Majjhima Nikaya number 77. Thanks for watching.